The Declaration. The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal palace made of light and metal. Inside its gleaming halls, creatures from 47 different worlds had gathered for the most important meeting in 3,000 years. The air buzzed with tension as alien voices whispered in dozens of languages. Ambassador Zethkari stood at the center of the great chamber. His forearms moved wildly as he spoke, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. He was angry. Very angry. Behind him, representatives from 12 different species nodded their heads in agreement. They all looked determined and confident. "The time of human weakness is over," Zethkari shouted, his voice carried to every corner of the massive room. "For 3,000 years we have watched them grow soft and lazy. They have no armies. They have no weapons. They sit in their little corner of space and do nothing while we struggle to survive." Many of the younger aliens cheered. They had never seen a human fight. They had only heard old stories from their grandparents about something called the Last War, but those were just stories. Ancient history. The humans they knew were peaceful. They spent their time studying plants and writing poetry. "They were weak. Look at what they control," Zethkari continued, pointing to a holographic map that appeared above the chamber. Bright dots showed star systems rich with rare metals and energy sources. Hundreds of worlds with everything we need. And what do they do with this wealth? Nothing. They pick flowers and paint pictures. The crowd grew louder. More aliens stood up and shook their fists or tentacles or claws in the air. They had been poor for so long while humans sat on treasure they did not use. It was not fair. "We declare the Treaty of Terra to be broken," Zethkari announced. "The 3,000-year peace is finished. We will take what should be ours." The chamber erupted in roars and screeches and electronic bleeps of approval. Flags waved. Weapons were raised high. War had been declared. But in the back of the chamber, someone was smiling. Director Sarah Chen sat quietly in the simple human section. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She wore a plain black uniform with no decorations or medals. Next to the colorful aliens around her, she looked very ordinary, very harmless. As the aliens celebrated their declaration of war, Sarah Chen began to smile. It was not a happy smile. It was not a sad smile. It was something else entirely. Something that made the few older aliens in the room suddenly feel very uncomfortable. Old Ambassador Krex of the Eternal Collective had been alive during the last war. He was over 4,000 years old, and his memory was perfect. When he saw that smile on the human's face, his 3 hearts started beating faster. He tried to speak to warn the others, but his voice was lost in the noise. Director Chen stood up slowly. The chamber began to quiet as aliens noticed the small human rising from her seat. When she spoke, her voice was soft and calm, but somehow everyone could hear her perfectly. "We accept," she said simply. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one breathed. "We accept your declaration of war," Chen continued. Her smile grew wider. "You have 48 hours to remove any civilian ships from the systems you plan to attack. After that..." She paused and looked around the room. "After that, you will remember why we went into retirement." Zethkari tried to laugh, but the sound came out strange and forced. "You threaten us? You have no army. No weapons. What will you fight us with? Your art supplies?" Sarah Chen tilted her head slightly, like a teacher looking at a confused student. "Ambassador Zethkari, may I ask you a question?" "Speak," he said, though his forearms had stopped moving. "Do you know what humans did before we became peaceful?" You explored space. You studied science. Before that," Chen said patiently, you fought wars among yourselves." "Before that," she said again. Zethkari's confidence began to fade. I do not know." "We were hunters," Chen said softly. "For millions of years we were the greatest predators our world had ever seen. We hunted creatures 10 times our size with nothing but sharp sticks and clever minds. We turned hunting into an art form. Then we turned that art into war. The chamber was so quiet that the hum of the station's engine seemed loud. 3,000 years ago we were very good at war, so good that we scared ourselves. So we decided to stop. We put away our weapons and chose to do other things. We thought maybe you would all grow up while we were gone, but it seems some of you are still children." Old Ambassador Krex finally found his voice. "Director Chen, please. These young ones do not understand. They were not alive during the last war. They do not know what humans can do when they are angry. Chen turned her kind eyes to the ancient alien. I know, old friend. That is why we are giving them 48 hours. We are not angry yet, but we will be if they hurt innocent people. She looked back at Zethkari. Ambassador, do you know why we really went into retirement? Because you were tired of fighting? No, Chen said. Because we won. We won so completely that continuing to fight would have been like an adult beating children. So we decided to wait. We hoped you would all grow strong enough to be our equals, to be our friends. But if you insist on being our enemies, she shrugged. Well, we are very good at having enemies. She began walking toward the exit. As she passed different groups of aliens, she spoke to them directly. Zethkari, your people make beautiful music. I hope you will continue to do so after this is over. She kept walking. The Trilaxians grow the most amazing fruits in the galaxy. It would be sad if something happened to your farming worlds. Another few steps. The Quantum Collective has discovered 3 new forms of mathematics in the last century. Such brilliant minds should not be wasted on war. She reached the door and turned back one last time. 48 hours, ladies, gentlemen, and others. Use them wisely. As the door closed behind her, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Zethkari tried to rally his allies. She is bluffing, he declared. What can one small human do against our mighty fleets? But old Ambassador Krex was already gathering his things. His voice was tired and sad. Young fool, she is not one small human. She is the voice of a species that once made war the way artists make masterpieces, and you just ask them to pick up their brushes again. As the ancient alien shuffled toward the door, he muttered something in his own language. The universal translator rendered it as, "The gardeners are about to remember that they used to be wolves." In her ship heading back to human space, Director Sarah Chen activated her communication system. This is Director Chen to all human worlds. Code White. Repeat Code White. The children want to play war. Please remind them why we stopped playing. Across human space, lights began turning on in places that had been dark for 3,000 years. The vacation was over. The greatest predators in the galaxy were waking up. The awakening. The message traveled faster than light itself, racing through quantum tunnels that connected every human world. In living rooms and offices, on farms and in laboratories, humans stopped what they were doing as the alert reached their personal communicators. Code White. After 3,000 years of peace, someone had declared war on humanity. On Earth, deep beneath the surface of the moon, ancient machines began to wake up. Servers that had been sleeping for millennia started humming back to life. Massive computer systems designed to coordinate fleets and armies stretched across the galaxy, powered on for the first time since the Treaty of Terra was signed. The lunar facilities had been disguised as research stations and museums, but now their true purpose became clear. Mars was even more dramatic. What every alien visitor believed to be mining operations and research facilities began to change. Mountain ranges split open to reveal hidden hangar bays large enough to hold entire fleets. Underground complexes that stretched for hundreds of miles started their activation sequences. Automated factories that had been building scientific equipment for centuries revealed that they had actually been manufacturing something very different. In the asteroid belt, things were strangest of all. Hundreds of mining platforms that had been peacefully extracting minerals for thousands of years suddenly began to transform. Like mechanical flowers blooming in fast motion, the platforms unfolded to reveal their true nature. They were not mining stations. They were weapons platforms. Each one was capable of turning entire moons into cosmic dust. Captain Marcus Webb stood on what everyone in the galaxy believed was the bridge of a simple exploration ship. The UES Curiosity was supposed to be a science vessel, designed for studying stars and discovering new planets. The aliens who had visited it over the years had seen laboratories and botanical gardens. They had met friendly scientists who showed them collections of space rocks and pressed flowers. They had never seen what Marcus was looking at now. As blast panels retracted from the windows, the true bridge was revealed. It was enormous, stretching for hundreds of meters in every direction. Hundreds of crew members sat at control stations that managed weapons systems more advanced than anything the current galaxy could imagine. Tactical displays showed fleet positions across dozens of star systems. Communication arrays capable of coordinating million-ship armadas hummed with activity. Status report, Marcus ordered calmly. All systems green. Captain, replied Commander Liu from the tactical station. The Curiosity, Discovery, Endeavor, and Pioneer are all reporting ready status. Deep storage fleets are beginning activation sequences across all sectors. Marcus nodded as he watched the transformation around him. The exploration fleet was shedding its peaceful disguise like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. The Curiosity alone was larger than most species' entire space forces, and it was just one ship among thousands that had been hiding in plain sight for 3,000 years. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Torres from communications, "we're receiving similar reports from all sectors. The Centauri battle group is online. The Vega defense fleet is deploying. The Wolf 359 strike force is ready for orders. And, sir." The young officer paused, his voice filled with awe. "The Titan yards are requesting permission to begin full production runs." Marcus smiled the same kind of smile that Director Chen had worn in the Galactic Council chamber. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not entirely kind either. It was the smile of someone who had been very patient for a very long time. "Granted, all of it. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the vacation's over." Across human space, the awakening continued. On worlds that aliens had visited for centuries, thinking they were seeing peaceful human colonies, the truth began to emerge. What had appeared to be parks and gardens were actually camouflaged military installations. Art galleries were revealed to be weapons research facilities. Music halls were command centers. Even the flower shops had been secretly manufacturing advanced military equipment. The humans had not been lying when they said they had become peaceful. They genuinely preferred art to war, science to destruction, poetry to conquest. But they had never stopped being human. They had simply chosen to focus their natural talents on creation instead of destruction. The same minds that designed the galaxy's most beautiful architecture had once designed its most terrible weapons. The same hands that now painted masterpieces had once built machines of war that made gods weep. On Terra, the human homeworld, the awakening was almost gentle. In a small city by the sea, Maria Santos was tending her garden when her communicator chimed with the code white alert. She sighed and set down her watering can. She had hoped she would never hear that sound again. Maria walked to what appeared to be a simple garden shed behind her house. Inside, hidden beneath pots of flowers and gardening tools, was a control panel that had not been used in 3,000 years. When she placed her hand on the scanner, the panel lit up with status reports from across the galaxy. "Admiral Santos to Fleet Command," she said softly. "The Omega Division is ready for deployment. What are your orders?" Admiral Santos had once commanded the largest space fleet in galactic history. She had won battles that songs were still sung about, even though most people thought they were just myths. After the war ended, she had chosen to retire to a quiet life growing roses and writing poetry. But she had never stopped being one of the greatest military minds the galaxy had ever produced. "Maria," came a familiar voice through the communicator. It was Sarah Chen, now aboard her ship heading back to human space. "It seems the children want to play rough. Are you ready to teach them some manners?" "I've been ready for 3,000 years, Sarah. My gardens can wait." The galaxy apparently cannot. As Admiral Santos activated systems that had slept for millennia, similar scenes played out across human space. The galaxy's most celebrated artist removed a dust cover from what appeared to be a sculpture, revealing a tactical planning system. The author of the galaxy's most beloved children's books opened a secret room in her library, exposing enough military intelligence data to plan the conquest of entire star systems. The chef, whose restaurants were famous across dozens of worlds, put down his cooking utensils and picked up the command. Codes for humanity's most advanced stealth. Fleet. They were all still the same people they had been the day before. They still loved art and music and poetry and cooking. But they were also something else. Something they had chosen to put aside but never forgotten how to be. They were warriors. The greatest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. And they were tired of playing nice. On his ship, Captain Marcus Webb received a priority transmission from Fleet Command. The message was simple. Hostile fleets detected in Kepler 442 system. Show them what they've forgotten. Marcus turned to his crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first assignment. Set course for Kepler 442, maximum speed." "Sir," asked Commander Liu, "what are our rules of engagement?" Marcus considered this for a moment. "The same rules we've always followed, Commander. Minimum necessary force, no civilian casualties, and make sure they understand exactly what they're dealing with." Understood, sir. Should we contact the enemy fleet and offer them a chance to surrender? Of course, Marcus replied. We're not barbarians. But, Commander? Yes, sir? When they refuse, make sure our response is educational. As the UES Curiosity and its sister ships accelerated toward their first battle in 3,000 years, their crews felt something they had not experienced in their lifetimes. It was not excitement or bloodlust or anger. It was something simpler and more profound. It was the satisfaction of finally being allowed to be themselves again. The first lesson Admiral Vextar had never been more confident in his entire life. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the mighty dreadnought Eternal Glory, he looked out at the largest fleet he had ever assembled. Nearly 1,000 ships from 12 different species floated in perfect formation around the Kepler 442 system. This was where humans grew most of their food, in peaceful farming colonies that had no defenses worth mentioning. The Admiral's four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the tactical display. His fleet included the most powerful warships from the Zilithian Empire, the fastest attack cruisers from the Hegemony, and the most advanced shield technology from the Quantum Collective. Against this overwhelming force, what could the humans possibly do? Sir, reported his sensor officer, we are detecting human ships approaching from the outer system. How many? Vextar asked, already planning his victory speech. 12 ships, sir. Vextar actually laughed. The sound echoed around his bridge like grinding metal. 12 ships? Against 1,000? He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to all fleet commanders. Tell them to prepare for the easiest victory in galactic history. The human ships were still 2 light hours away when they first appeared on long-range sensors. Admiral Vextar ordered his fleet to advance slowly, wanting to savor this moment. He had dreamed of this day for decades. Finally, the arrogant humans would learn their place in the galaxy. As the 2 fleets drew closer, something strange began to happen. The human ships were not behaving like normal vessels. They seemed to move without accelerating, appearing to shift position in ways that made no sense according to known physics. When one moment they were here, and the next moment they were there, with no visible transition between the 2 states. Sir, the sensor officer said nervously, the human ships are not following standard movement patterns. Our computers cannot predict their course. It does not matter, Vextar replied, though he felt a small twinge of unease. 12 ships cannot defeat 1,000, no matter how strangely they move. When the human fleet was finally close enough for visual contact, Admiral Vextar got his first good look at their enemy. The ships were beautiful in a way that made no sense for military vessels. They looked more like works of art than instruments of war, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to shift and change color in the starlight. They were also much larger than his sensors had indicated. Each human ship was at least twice the size of his own flagship, but 12 was still 12 and 1,000 was still 1,000. Open communications, Vextar ordered. I want to speak to their commander before we destroy them. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead human ship. A woman with short brown hair and calm green eyes looked back at him. She wore a simple white uniform with no visible rank insignia. Behind her, Vextar could see a bridge that was both beautiful and somehow terrible. It was filled with displays and controls that hurt to look at directly, as if they were showing information that was not meant for alien eyes. This is Captain Sarah Reeves of the UES Retribution, the human said politely. You have entered human protected space without authorization. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal, or we will interpret your presence as an act of aggression. This is your only warning. Admiral Vextar could not believe what he was hearing. Captain Reeves, I am Admiral Vextar of the Combined Coalition Fleet. I command 1,000 ships. You command 12. Do you seriously expect me to retreat? Captain Reeves tilted her head slightly, like someone trying to explain something simple to a small child. Admiral, you seem to be under the impression that numbers matter in this situation. Let me clarify. You are not fighting the Zilithian Empire or the Hegemony or the Quantum Collective. You are fighting humans. Numbers have never mattered when fighting humans. That is ridiculous, Vextar sputtered. 1,000 ships cannot be defeated by 12. You're right, Captain Reeves agreed. 1,000 ships cannot be defeated by 12 ships. But you are not facing 12 ships. You are facing 12 human ships. The difference is significant. I do not understand the distinction. Captain Reeves smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not entirely kind either. You will. The communication ended. For a moment, Admiral Vextar stared at the blank screen. Then he shook himself and turned to his weapons officer. All ships prepare to fire. Target the human vessels. Sir, the weapons officer reported, we are ready to fire on your command. Fire. 1,000 ships fired at once. The space between the two fleets lit up like a newborn star as energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile swarms raced toward the 12 human vessels. It was the most massive coordinated attack in modern galactic history. No ship could survive such overwhelming firepower. The humans did not even try to avoid it. Instead, something impossible happened. The attack simply stopped existing. Not deflected, not absorbed, not blocked by shields. They just ceased to be. As if the universe had decided that they had never been fired at all. What happened? Vextar demanded. Why did our weapons not hit them? I do not know, sir, the weapons officer stammered. Our targeting system showed direct hits, but the weapons just disappeared. On the screen, the 12 human ships continued their advance. They had not even slowed down. Then the UES Retribution fired back. What emerged from the human ship was not a weapon in any sense that the Coalition understood. It was more like a statement written in pure energy, a lance of light that did not obey the normal rules of physics carved through space toward the Coalition fleet. It passed through 7 ships in a perfect line, and as it touched each vessel, their shields failed, their weapons stopped working, and their engines shut down. The ships were not destroyed. They were simply turned off, but that was not the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that it was clearly a demonstration. The beam had been aimed to cause maximum shock with minimum damage. It was a warning shot. This is your last chance, Captain Reeves's voice echoed across all Coalition communication channels simultaneously. Leave now and you will be allowed to go home with your lives and your dignity intact. Continue this attack, and we will show you why the galaxy used to have nightmares about human warfare. Admiral Vextar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at their instruments in confusion and growing fear. 7 of his most powerful ships had been disabled by a single shot from one human vessel, but he was an admiral of the combined Coalition fleet. He could not retreat from 12 ships, no matter how strange they were. All ships, he ordered, his voice shaking slightly. Continue the attack. Focus all fire on the lead human vessel. Captain Reeves's response came immediately. Very well, Admiral. You chose this. Remember that. What followed was not a battle. It was an education. The human ships moved through the Coalition fleet like dancers performing a deadly ballet. They appeared and disappeared at will, striking with weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics with each shot. But they were not trying to destroy. They were teaching a lesson. Coalition ships found their weapons systematically dismantled by impossibly precise energy beams. Their engines were shut down by fields that wrapped around them like gentle hands. Their communication systems were taken over and used to broadcast messages of surrender that the crews had not sent. One by one, the mighty warships of the combined Coalition fleet were reduced to floating museums of their own inadequacy. In 17 minutes it was over. 993 Coalition ships floated helplessly in space, their crews alive and unharmed but completely powerless. The 7 ships that had been disabled in the first shot had been repaired and returned to operational status, as if the humans wanted to make sure that every single vessel could witness their defeat. Admiral Vextar sat in his command chair, staring at his dead instruments. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore basic functions, but nothing responded. They were alive and breathing, but their ship might as well have been an asteroid for all the control they had over it. Admiral, Captain Reeves's voice came over the communication system that the humans had apparently repaired for this purpose. Do you understand now? We never had a chance, did we? Vextar asked quietly. No, Captain Reeves replied gently, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to learn that for yourselves. Admiral, you commanded this fleet with skill and courage. Your tactics were sound, your coordination was excellent, and your ships are well designed. Against any other enemy in the galaxy, you would have won this battle. But not against humans. But not against humans, she confirmed. We are not your enemies, Admiral. We never wanted to be. But if you insist on making us your enemies, this is what it looks like. What happens to us now? Now you go home, Captain Reeves said. Your ships will be fully repaired and returned to you within the hour. We have taken the liberty of upgrading your defensive systems and improving your life support. Consider it a gift between neighbors. You are letting us go? Admiral, we are humans. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We do not take revenge. We simply defend what is ours and protect those who cannot protect themselves. You came here to take our worlds. The demonstration news of what happened at Kepler 442 spread through the coalition like wildfire. In emergency meetings across dozens of worlds, military leaders stared at sensor recordings that made no sense. Coalition admirals watched the footage over and over, trying to understand how 12 ships had defeated 1,000 without firing a single shot in anger. But the coalition leaders were not ready to admit defeat. Pride is a dangerous thing, and these species had spent 3,000 years believing they were the equal of any force in the galaxy. They convinced themselves that the humans had just been lucky, or that Admiral Vextar had somehow made a terrible mistake. 3 more systems fell in the following week. Each time, coalition fleets arrived expecting easy victory and found themselves facing small groups of human ships that moved like living things and fought like forces of nature. Each time the coalition forces were defeated without a single death. Their ships disabled and repaired and sent home with polite notes explaining the improvements humanity had made to their systems. But the coalition would not learn. Could not learn. They had declared war, and now their pride demanded that they fight until the end. That was when humanity decided to stop being gentle. The Rigel system had been chosen as the coalition's primary staging area. It was here that they had assembled their reserve fleets, hundreds of thousands of ships from species across the galaxy. They had fortified the system with orbital weapons platforms and defensive stations. They had created what they believed to be an impregnable fortress from which they could launch their final assault on human space. They never noticed the single ship that appeared at the edge of the system. The UES Prometheus was humanity's gift to the galaxy's memory. At over 300 kilometers in length, it was not so much a ship as a mobile stellar engineering platform. It had been built during the last war but never used, because the conflict had ended before humanity needed to deploy their most terrible weapons. Now, after 3,000 years of peaceful sleep, the Prometheus had awakened. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the massive vessel, looking out at the coalition fleet that filled the space around Rigel's 4th planet. She was Director Sarah Chen's daughter, though she had chosen to follow her grandmother's path into the military, rather than her mother's diplomatic career. Like her mother, she had hoped never to use the skills she had trained for her entire life. "Admiral," reported Captain Williams from the navigation station, "we are in position." "Thank you, Captain. Open a channel to the coalition fleet." The communication request was accepted after several minutes of debate among the coalition commanders. When Admiral Chen's image appeared on screens throughout the enemy fleet, there was an audible gasp from many of the alien crews. The family resemblance to Director Sarah Chen was unmistakable. But where the director had been diplomatic and patient, Admiral Chen looked like war itself wearing a human face. "This is Admiral Chen aboard the UES Prometheus," she said, her voice carrying to every ship in the system. "You have built your fleet in our backyard, threatened our civilians, and ignored our warnings. Since you seem to have forgotten what humans are capable of, allow me to remind you, the Prometheus began to move, not toward the coalition fleet but toward Rigel itself. The massive ship positioned itself next to the star like a remora fish swimming alongside a whale. Then it began to extend a series of collection arrays that were each large enough to dock a battleship. What you are about to witness," Admiral Chen continued, "is stellar engineering. We developed this technology during the last war but never had occasion to use it. Consider yourselves fortunate to be the first to see it demonstrated." The collection arrays touched the surface of Rigel, and something impossible began to happen. Stellar material, plasma hot enough to melt planets, began flowing from the star into the Prometheus. Not stolen or sucked away, but carefully guided and channeled through conduits that should not have been able to exist according to any known physics. Each round, Admiral Chen explained conversationally, as if she were discussing the weather, contains approximately the energy output of a small star. Compressed into a projectile the size of a shuttle, our targeting systems are accurate to within a few centimeters at interstellar ranges. The coalition fleet watched in growing horror as the collected stellar material was refined, compressed and shaped into ammunition that glowed like captured suns. 17,000 rounds were prepared while the aliens watched, each one containing enough energy to vaporize a moon. "We have 17,000 rounds prepared," Admiral Chen announced. "Your fleet has 16,843 vessels." I believe the mathematics speak for themselves. The silence that followed was complete. Across the coalition fleet, hardened warriors who had never known fear found themselves staring at weapons that could unmake reality itself. These were not just tools of destruction. They were proof that humans had learned to play with the fundamental forces of creation. Coalition Admiral Thexmore, commander of the assembled forces, found his voice first. You would not use such weapons. The destruction would be visible from half the galaxy." "You are correct," Admiral Chen replied. "We would prefer not to use them, which is why you have exactly 1 hour to begin evacuating this system. Any ship remaining after that time will be considered a legitimate military target." "This is madness," Thexmore protested. "You cannot simply destroy entire fleets." "Admiral," Chen said patiently, 3,000 years ago we fought a war against the greatest military powers the galaxy had ever seen. We won that war so completely that most species today think it was a myth. We won it using weapons that were primitive compared to what you see before you now. Did you really think we had spent the last 3 millennia becoming weaker?" The coalition fleet began to move. Not to attack, but to retreat. Ships that had been arranged in proud battle formations scattered like leaves in a hurricane. The retreat was so rapid it was almost comical. But Admiral Chen was not finished with her demonstration. As the last enemy vessel fled the system, the Prometheus revealed its secondary capability. The stellar material it had collected was carefully reformed and gently returned to Rigel. But the process had an unexpected side effect. The star's output increased by nearly 30%, its light becoming brighter and more stable. What had been a marginal system suitable only for military bases was transformed into prime real estate that could support billions of colonists. Consider this a gift. Admiral Chen broadcast to the fleeing fleet, "Proof that we prefer creation to destruction. We could have used our stellar engineering to turn your sun into a weapon. Instead, we have given you a better star that will provide light and warmth for millions of years. This is what humans do when we are not forced to defend ourselves." But the lesson was not over. As the coalition ships reached the edge of the system, they found something waiting for them. A small human patrol ship no larger than a shuttle appeared directly in their path. It should have been swept aside by the fleeing fleet without even slowing down. Instead, it stopped them all. A single gesture from the tiny ship created a barrier that the entire coalition fleet could not cross. Not a physical wall, but something more fundamental. The space itself simply refused to allow the alien ships to pass, until the human vessel gave permission. "This is Lieutenant Commander Park of the UES. Whisper," came a young voice over the communication channels. "Admiral Chen has asked me to escort you safely out of human space. Please form an orderly line and follow my ship. Do not deviate from the prescribed course. Do not attempt to scan or photograph any human installations you may observe during transit." The most powerful military fleet in coalition, history was led out of human space by a single ship piloted by an officer who sounded young enough to be in school. As they traveled, the aliens caught glimpses of human installations that defied comprehension. Entire asteroid belts had been converted into manufacturing complexes. Planets had been hollowed out and turned into ships larger than moons. Stars had been caged and their output redirected to power weapons that could reshape reality itself. But strangest of all were the humans themselves. On every world they passed, the aliens could see human cities filled with art galleries and concert halls, parks and gardens, schools and libraries. These were not the installations of a military power. They were the homes of a people who genuinely loved peace and beauty and knowledge. They were also the most terrifying thing the Coalition had ever seen, because it meant that everything they had witnessed, the impossible weapons, the stellar engineering, the casual rewriting of physics, was what humans did in their spare time. Their hobbies, their side projects. What could they do if they actually tried? By the time Lieutenant Commander Park escorted the last Coalition ship out of human space, the war was effectively over, not because the Coalition had been defeated in battle, but because they had been shown the difference between fighting other species and fighting humans. Other species built weapons to fight wars. Humans built weapons to end the concept of war itself. The message was received across the galaxy. The gardeners had shown their thorns. The artists had revealed that they painted with starlight and carved with gravity itself. The new understanding. The war lasted exactly 28 days. When historians would later write about the shortest major conflict in galactic history, they would struggle to find the right words to describe it. It had not been a war in any traditional sense. It had been more like a teaching demonstration, with humanity as the patient instructor and the coalition as reluctant students learning a lesson they had not wanted to learn. Not a single human life had been lost during the entire conflict. The coalition forces had suffered no deaths either, though their pride had been completely destroyed. Every disabled ship had been repaired and returned to its owners, often with improvements that would have taken decades to develop on their own. Polite notes were attached explaining the upgrades, written in the tone one might use to thank a neighbor for watching the house while away on vacation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council that followed was very different from the meeting that had started the war. The Great Crystal Chamber was quieter now, filled with representatives who had learned something about themselves and their place in the galaxy. Many of the younger species looked confused and frightened. The older ones looked relieved. Ambassador Zethkari stood before Director Sarah Chen once again, but his forearms were no longer moving wildly. Instead, they trembled slightly as he tried to find words for what he was feeling. Behind him, the other coalition leaders sat in silence, their earlier confidence replaced by something approaching awe. We had forgotten, Zethkari managed to say. His voice was barely above a whisper. 3,000 years of peace and we forgot what you were capable of. Director Chen's expression was patient and understanding. She looked like a teacher who had just finished explaining a difficult concept to struggling students. That was the point, Ambassador. We wanted you to forget. We wanted to give you the chance to grow and develop without living in our shadow. We hoped you would become strong enough to stand as our equals. But we are not your equals, Zethkari replied. We never were. How could we be? You held back for 3,000 years and we thought it was weakness. We declared war on you, and you defeated our greatest fleets without firing a shot in anger. What does that make us? Before Director Chen could answer, an ancient voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Old Ambassador Krex of the Eternal Collective struggled to his feet, his aged form supported by mechanical devices that kept him mobile despite his 4,000 years of life. It makes you young, the ancient being said softly. Director Chen, your people could have conquered the galaxy at any time during these 3 millennia. Why did you not? Chen turned to face the elder diplomat, her expression warm with genuine affection. Because conquest is easy, old friend. Building something worth conquering is hard. For 3,000 years we have been gardeners, not warriors. We have watched you all grow, develop, create beauty and wonder throughout the galaxy. We have been teachers, guides, and when necessary, protectors. But never conquerors. She stood and addressed the full assembly, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber. The peace is not over because you declared war on us. The peace is over because you have finally grown up enough to understand what it really means. You are no longer children hiding behind human protection. You are ready to become our partners in building something greater than any one species could achieve alone. The chamber remained silent as the implications of her words sank in. Finally, a representative from the Quantum Collective found the courage to speak. What do you propose, Director Chen? Partnership, Chen replied simply. True partnership. We will no longer hide our capabilities, but neither will we use them for domination. Instead, we offer something even more valuable. Shared knowledge, shared protection, and shared responsibility for the future of the galaxy. She activated a holographic display that showed star charts spanning the entire galaxy. Human technology will be shared gradually, responsibly, with species that prove ready for it. Not as gifts to subjects, but as tools shared between equals. Human protection will be available to those who need it, not as rulers, but as friends. Ambassador Zethkari looked at the display with wonder. You would share your stellar engineering, your gravitational manipulation, your faster-than-light communication networks? When you are ready for them, Chen confirmed. Some technologies require wisdom to use safely. We learned that the hard way, 3,000 years ago. We will not let others make the same mistakes we made. And what do you want in return? Asked another representative. Chen smiled. What we have always wanted: art, music, poetry, stories, science, philosophy, beauty, wonder, the things that make life worth living. The things that make the galaxy a better place for everyone. Old Ambassador Krex nodded slowly. You want us to continue being who we are. We want you to become the best versions of who you are, Chen corrected. We want the Trilaxians to keep making their beautiful music, but maybe with instruments that can create symphonies across multiple star systems. We want the Quantum Collective to continue their mathematical research, but with computational power that can model entire galactic clusters. We want the Zilithians to keep growing their amazing crops, but on worlds that we can help them terraform into paradise. The vision she painted was breathtaking. Not conquest or submission, but collaboration on a scale that no species had ever imagined. Humans providing the power and protection and advanced technology, while the other species provided the creativity and diversity and passion that made civilization worth having. There is one condition, Director Chen said quietly. This partnership requires trust, and trust requires that we all acknowledge what we really are. Humans are not peaceful because we are weak. We are peaceful because we are so strong that violence has become meaningless to us. You must understand this and accept it if we are to move forward together. She paused, looking around the chamber. We are gardeners who became warriors out of necessity, not warriors who pretended to be gardeners. We choose peace because we have seen what war really costs, not because we fear war itself. If you can accept that, if you can trust us despite what you now know we are capable of, then we can build something wonderful together. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species representatives argued among themselves, with each other, and with their home governments. Some were terrified by what they had learned about human capabilities. Others were excited by the possibilities that partnership offered. A few were still too proud to accept help from anyone, even humans. But in the end, wisdom prevailed. The Terran Accords 2.0, as historians would later call them, were signed not in defeat but in understanding. The document was unlike any treaty in galactic history. It was not about territories or trade routes or military alliances. It was about growing up as a galactic civilization. The signing ceremony was held on Earth in a simple garden outside the human capital. Representatives from 47 species gathered not in a crystal palace or marble hall, but among flowers and trees under an open sky. It was a statement about what humans valued most: life, growth, and the natural beauty that could flourish when war was no longer necessary. As the last signature was added to the treaty, Director Chen made one final announcement. In honor of this new partnership, humanity is establishing the Galactic Development Foundation. We will be providing technology, resources, and expertise to help all species reach their full potential. The first projects will be terraforming programs to create new worlds for expanding populations, and research stations to develop safe applications of advanced technologies. How many worlds? Asked a representative. As many as needed, Chen replied. We have the capability to terraform thousands of worlds simultaneously. We can create custom environments for any species, any culture, any dream you can imagine. The galaxy is vast, and there is room for everyone to flourish. Ambassador Zeth Kari, who had started the war that led to this peace, found himself weeping tears of gratitude. Director Chen, I do not understand why you forgive us. We threatened you. We declared war on you. We tried to take your worlds. Chen's smile was gentle and understanding. Ambassador, you are parents who watch their children grow up and move out of the house. You are proud and scared and maybe a little jealous. These are normal feelings. We understand them because we have children too. But we could have been destroyed. Your weapons. Our weapons exist to make sure they never have to be used, Chen explained. The best sword is one that never leaves its sheath. The best war is one that teaches everyone why war should be avoided. You learned that lesson without anyone having to die for it. That makes this the most successful military campaign in human history. As the ceremony concluded and representatives prepared to return to their worlds with news of the new partnership, Ambassador Krex approached Director Chen privately. The ancient being moved slowly, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Director, he said quietly, I was alive during the last war. I remember what humans were like when they were angry. What I saw in the last 28 days was not anger. What was it? Chen considered the question carefully. Disappointment, I think. We had hoped you would grow past the need for war. When you declared war on us, we realized we had failed as teachers.